who is an alumnus of the University of Waterloo with her PhD in organizational psychology, the same program. So, woohoo! So, known as the water cooler psychologist, Liane is renowned for her experience on leadership, team effectiveness, and productivity. And she's a New York Times best-selling author of 3 books, a regular contributor to the Harvard Business Review, and the co-founder of 3COZs. Yes.
3 Co's, yep.
Yeah, 3 Co's, yes, thank you. So today she will be speaking on team building, meaningful collaboration, and work-life balance in a virtual context. So please join me in welcome Liane Davey. Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, my pleasure. So fun to be here, Jaydum. Thanks.
Yeah, no, thank you. And so I just wanted to know if you could share a little bit about how you got involved with the work that you do and what work you're currently engaged in.
Yeah, absolutely. So it all starts when I flunked calculus. How many great stories start with failing calculus? So I had decided I was going to go to med school, and I was in first year math at Western, and like I belly flopped calculus, and so I at some point decided I was going to shift things, and I was going to take physiology and psychology, this interesting combined major. And I couldn't take any of the hardcore psychology classes because I didn't have the math prerequisite, but I could take some of the applied psych courses and sort of stall while I picked up the math credit. And so I took this class called Industrial Organizational Psychology, and I fell in love with it. And so that, which was many years ago now, just immediately, as soon as I took that very first class, and interestingly, at the time, it was, I guess it was 1990. And so the Space Shuttle Challenger incident was not that long in the past, and they were still trying to understand all the psychology and dynamics that allowed them to launch the space shuttle when it had a fatal flaw in it. And so that was one of the cases we studied. And so that's really where I got started, and then got really interested through graduate school in specifically team dynamics and how interpersonal dynamics play out. And then jumped into the consulting field, working in that space of leadership and teams and culture many years ago.
Yeah.
And have just spent a really fascinating career getting deeper and deeper into that kind of stuff ever since.
Yeah, that's amazing. And now you have your own organization that you are running.
Yeah. So about 6 years ago, my husband and I decided that we were going to quit our jobs and we were going to start our own tiny little consulting firm. So the name 3 Co's comes from our mission statement, which is to transform the way people communicate, connect, and contribute so they can achieve amazing things together. So the 3 Co's are communicate, connect, and contribute. So we have been having a blast doing that. So Craig is also a Waterloo alum, did his PhD. He was Waterloo's first ever graduate in cognitive behavioral neuroscience.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And we met on the very first day outside the graduate student office in the PASS building. And so we've kind of brought together these 2 disciplines, both psychology based, but one for me really about group dynamics and that kind of level. And with Craig, the neuroscience and the neuroscience of high performance and decision making and all those things. So it's a great combo.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. People are a little bit more familiar with what you do. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was something that's been impacting me greatly. And that's in regards to before the pandemic, I was able to, walk past someone's office and have a totally random and unscheduled conversation, which was a key part in relationship building, I found, and getting to know my coworkers. So I just wondered what you thought of how this lack of organic conversation opportunities has affected our workplace relationships.
Yeah, I think it really has. If you think about, maybe if we think about a metaphor of fabric, right? You have one set of threads going one way. And I think of that as sort of the official people that we work with on our team that we need to collaborate with to get our work done, those sorts of things. But that fabric is only fabric when it's crossed with threads going the
Mm,
other way, which are those people we intersect with who, they're pointed in a different direction. Their tasks are different. We don't necessarily have a lot in common with them, or we don't interact with them very frequently, but we absolutely need those collisions with them, those intersections with them, to strengthen the organization, to see our issues from different stakeholder perspectives, all those sorts of things. And one of my clients recently, who works in a big global software company, he said it so beautifully. He's like, I want to talk to people who I don't want to talk to.
right.
And I just laughed. He said, it's not the people that I'm thinking about in COVID, in work from home. If there's somebody you think about, there are enough ways to connect with them that's okay, right?
Mhm.
We've learned to have a quick, a quick text to somebody, a quick FaceTime call, whatever, right? We
Yeah.
figured that out. It's not those so much, although those could be a lot better if we were in person, but at least those are happening, even if they're happening with lower fidelity or lower quality. It's the conversations that, oh, I bumped into you at the coffee pot and I wasn't thinking about you. And I wasn't thinking, but wow, once we were actually standing waiting for the coffee pot, we had this great conversation about whatever. So I just loved how he said that. I want to talk to people I don't want to talk to.
Yeah.
Because that's what's missing. And so I think it will at some level affect our sense of belonging. It will affect spontaneous innovation. It will affect our ability to kind of feel in the know, which may cause
Mhm.
us to, be making decisions in our work that are not as well contextualized as they would be if we just had a general feel for the buzz going on and what people are working on and the conversations you overhear in the elevator. So I think it's real. And of course, we don't yet know
Yeah.
what all of the repercussions will be.
Yeah, no, it's true. And that's the thing, I was talking to a friend about how when you're walking from a meeting and you're talking to each other after, sometimes something comes up that sparks interest and helps you to further what you might be working on, right? So
To and fro is the best, right? And we don't have to and fro anymore. And
yeah.
so we don't have the, on the way there, we don't have the, the gauging, that sort of social process of like, how are you thinking about this? Or what are you worried about? Or how do you think this is going to go? That's important. And we don't have the fro in the sense of, did you think that was a really mean comment? And
Yeah.
that calibration, that kind of like, what did that spark for you? Or
Mhm.
those sorts of things. So missing to and fro is a loss for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I was thinking about also in those conversations where yeah, sorry, I just got blanked there. So I'm like, what was I saying? I was on a train of thought. And but yeah, the to and fro, the ability to, okay, so for example, when I'm in a meeting and you're in a meeting with a bunch of people, and then after, like, let's say you're in with someone on your team and then people on a different team, and then the desire to, after you hang up and leave the conversation, to be able to have that connection with the person you work with, to be like, hey, did, like what you said, right? Get the feedback and the feel.
Mhm.
So but I find too, because the meetings are kind of back to back, that doesn't also, there's not really space for that always.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, thank you for that. Now I'm going to switch gears a little bit in regards to kind of people who are starting new positions. So if someone's starting a new position, they've never met their coworkers in person and they'll have to rely exclusively on virtual interactions. What advice can you give to those people in connecting with coworkers and fostering a collaborative relationship with them?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's going to take effort. So generally with our social norms, if somebody new comes into a physical space, it's considered the role of the existing people to play host. So everyone gets that when you're the new person, you get the tour of, here's everybody and here's how the coffee machine works and, those sorts of things. Um, and so the onus is clearly on the existing employees to make you feel welcome. I think that is much less prevalent in this model because you can't see someone like sitting there with no one to go for lunch with, and you can't, right? Like it's out of sight and out of mind. So I think one thing is you're going to have to be a little bit more proactive and go a little further. If it used to be 75-25 where they would host you, you might have to go the other way and be finding ways to say, I would love to connect. Could we have 15 minutes? Is there a time in your day where you have a cup of coffee that I could just get to know you a little more? So you're probably going to have to be a lot more proactive. One of the big things we're learning about virtual teams is that there is a lot of social friction to saying that I don't know something. So one of the reasons capability gaps become a problem on virtual teams is it just feels really hard, like a big hurdle to say, I don't know how to do this. I'm taking forever doing this. So, be aware of that and just understand that it's okay. You can overcome that. So finding ways to say to people, this isn't coming easily, or even just, do you have any tips for how to do this? I've just started doing this task for the first time. Any recommendations? Could I just be on a Zoom and you share your screen while you're working so I can even just see how you work through this process? Those kinds of things. But it's going to have to be much more coming from you in many cases because people just aren't thinking about it. So shadowing is very possible with all the technologies we have now. If you just ask someone to share their screen, but we just don't think to do it. So don't be shy about it. But interestingly, a lot of organizations are saying to me, we're really reticent to bring on new employees during COVID because, we're worried that we won't be able to show our culture. And I would argue the exact opposite is true, that in a time like this, your culture is going to be incredibly clear. What really matters to you. So what's going to go are all the faux culture things, the foosball table and the, Nespresso in the cafeteria. So all the stuff that you were trying to do to sort of put lipstick on the pig of your culture, those things are gone. But what's actually there? Who cares about one another? What takes priority? What takes precedent? What happens when push comes to shove? All of those kinds of things are going to be even more apparent in COVID times in remote work than they were before. So just know that you're probably learning what really matters in the organization. And that could be to the good or to the bad, unfortunately.
Yeah, definitely. And when you were talking about shadowing, I was questioning kind of whether, based on this, if organizations have kind of maybe partnered their new employees with
Yeah.
other employees. So have you been seeing that kind of stuff being done?
So not a lot. Now, some organizations always do that. They have orientation buddies for people. I think that's an excellent idea. It really is a positive thing to do no matter what. But in this time, just having somebody and then saying, if you're someone's orientation buddy, we're expecting you to invest a couple of hours or whatever it is, maybe 8 hours a week, but being clear with them that that's something we expect you to devote time to. We value it. It's important. It's a role like any other. And then feeling some sense of obligation for, I'm the one to make sure that the person knows the lay of the land. I'm the one to make sure that they have the resources they need. I'm the one to make sure they have a touch point, those kinds of things. So I think it's a great practice. I think you need to be careful right now to not say that, just add it on top of all the other stuff you're doing 18 hours a day, but to actually recognize it as, we're going to take this priority off your plate so that you can be someone's orientation partner for the next month or however long it takes. Or that it may just be that the expectation is, in the first week, it's going to be 8 hours. And the second, it's going to be 4. And then it's going to be, 1 for the next, 2 months as they learn new things that, they would love your insight on or your help with.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like the way that you talked about, shifting the workload, not just adding something to their plate and saying, okay, here's something else, but
But
finding a
wait,
balance
there's
in there,
more. Yeah. Which is
right?
what we do all the time, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
So now with your experience, what are some of the biggest challenges that you've seen people facing with their teams since things have went virtual?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
Yeah. So certainly, because my primary focus is on the role of productive conflict and the importance of productive conflict, a lot of our norms around conflict are that you have difficult conversations when you're face to face. So people often save them up for what they believe is the appropriate context to have a difficult conversation. And if you had an issue on, March 10th last year that you're saving up for like October when you can see the person again, just know that that's causing a tremendous amount of damage. So um, I see a lot of resentment building up in teams. So I wrote a piece and an exercise around what I call unseen work. So starting to see a lot of situations where people are working extremely hard in COVID. For the most part, we're seeing people dialing up the time that they're working, and a lot of that is really, it's not seen, it's not understood. And sometimes our work outputs don't make obvious our work inputs. So there was either physical, cognitive, or emotional labor that went into doing work that the people on the other end don't acknowledge or don't see. And that means we're starting. So I was working with a creative agency, and the guy who was working on this creative strategy work, he was, you could tell that other people were like, kind of like, you just have to do the strategy stuff. It's like, you could tell that for him, it was hours of research, hours of trying on, you know, one sentence where you switch around the words, or like just painstaking, both cognitive and emotional work to get this to where it gets to. And when he sends it to his peers, they feel like, well, you just had to write a great sentence. And they feel like, he's got it easy. So this unseen work is leading to resentment. It's causing a lot of problems on teams. So that's a big one that I'm seeing. So, conflict, the absence of important conflict in general, and specifically about conflict around, are we all pulling our fair share of the workload during COVID, is another big issue. What else am I seeing? Just fatigue. People are just like bored of looking at the same four walls, run down by, being on video conference is extremely tiring. We know that the most tiring aspect of it is poor quality audio. So every time I'm on a call, there'll be somebody with terrible audio. They're using AirPods, or they're like, just something makes the audio really hard to hear. And so you're straining. Well, that's incredibly fatiguing. You're trying to pick up, your brain still wants to pick up all the body language cues, but now you're trying to pick it up from tiny little thumbnails in a Zoom gallery with shoddy webcams. Again, that takes a lot of processing power. So I find that if I do a half day session facilitated over Zoom, I'm as tired as flying somewhere and doing a full day session. So fatigue is another thing that, we're just seeing. And then just like, it's monotony. It's people like variety, and not all people, but mostly we like a little bit of variety. And we're now at a point where it's just, every single day we're getting up and facing um, workloads that we can't ever feel. That's the other thing, right? I think the workloads are so high right now that this is why people are having trouble with boundaries in their work, is that 6 o'clock comes and they should have been done at 5, but at 6 they're still not done, but there's no hope of being done. So you kind of feel crappy all the time that you never got to done. So that's another thing weighing on a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely. I feel that as well. Like, and also the idea that you talked about initially too, about the amount of work that you put in, and the output. I can relate to that.
Yeah.
Um, and also the work-life balance. So that's the thing. So in regards to the work-life balance and how much time we're actually spending working, I find myself reading and responding to emails during the day, and then also all out through the night. So I'm curious to know how you think we can have more of a work-life balance in a virtual context. Like, what advice do you give to people
Yeah.
to kind of find that balance?
People probably won't like my answer to this, but in my experience of working with a lot of leaders and a lot of teams, um, poor work-life balance is frequently a self-inflicted wound. Um, and I tend to see when people stand up and say, like, I'm going to stop now, or I'm with my kids tonight, or I'm taking this as a vacation day. Most leaders I see celebrate that. They say, good for you. I need to do that too. Or right there. But I think many of us, we fear we don't have the self-confidence that we've made a good contribution. We don't have the willingness to say, this is good. I added value. I earned my salary. I supported my teammates in being successful. And that's enough of a day's work. And I'm going to stop. And, we are addicted to our phones, addicted to the hit of a new message and things like that. And if you check your email all night, then, y- you can say, bosses should delay their emails and have them not come out till 8 o'clock the next morning. But then where's the individual accountability and responsibility for saying, if you don't want to respond to emails at night, don't answer them. So, what I try and do is set a standard that if you don't need it till tomorrow, like my clients know I'm going to be on my email by 7:30 every morning. So if 7:30 is okay, email me. And then I won't look until 7:30. But if you need me, phone me because my phone will ring and that's okay. And I'm totally fine if you need me, that every once in a while it's going to be outside of work hours and I'm okay with that. What's not okay is me checking my email all night in anticipation. Then I spot things that aren't urgent and I respond just out of habit or just because I can. And then I'm out of the flow of my evening. I'm, getting yelled at by my kids for having my phone where I shouldn't. So, you know, the biggest thing you control in work life balance is your choices. You don't control your boss's choices, but you do control your own. So just ask yourself, is this a self inflicted wound? If I didn't respond to this until tomorrow, would, would I get in trouble? Um, if somebody adds something to your plate when you're not going to be able to get to it, did you say, this is going to take me this many hours. You'd already asked me to do this, which is going to take this many hours. Which of those would you like me to do today? And which can wait till tomorrow? Or so, the more we can take control of at least the part of work-life balance that's in our own hands, and be making deliberate choices about, is this what I want? Do I want to be picking up my email right now? So one of the things that's worked for me is to have two different devices, and not everyone can afford two different devices, but I have an old iPad, um, and that iPad is my personal time device. So I watch Netflix on that. I do Facebook on that. I read the New York Times on that. That's my home device. So in the evenings, if I'm looking at a device, it's this clunky old iPad, because then I'm not with my phone, I'm not with my emails. And that tiny bit of using technology as a boundary management tool has really worked for me. So I leave the phone at my desk. In the family room is the iPad, and the two don't cross. It's like two different worlds. And so if you can afford that, if there's a possible, and again, a clunker like your old phone or your old device, sure, it's fine. You don't need more than a clunker for those kinds of things. But that's really helped me to say work time. And the other thing is, this behind me is a barrier, a screen, and I put it up. If I took it down, you'd see that behind it is my kitchen, and it's another way of saying work time barrier is up, and then I can take it down and say, no, this it's down. That means the kids can chat with me, whatever else. So physical boundary management, psychological boundary management, technological boundary management, but you really want to think about what are the boundaries I want, and what are a few things I can put in place to reinforce them. Take care of the 70% of work-life balance issues that are self-inflicted, and then maybe you can start to chip away at, your boss's expectations or your workload.
Yeah, definitely. I think those are really great points, like in regards to the physical, the psychological, and then I would have never thought, but you know what, that's part of it, right? Is seeing those emails. And for some reason for myself, it creates a sense of urgency, right? Like
Yes.
oh, I need to
Yes.
respond. Like even though it's not necessarily impacting something 5 days from now, I have an urgency to respond, right?
Right. And
Um,
that's just our basic psychology. We're all Pavlov's dog now with our phones and with dings and with, so um I have text notifications turned on my devices. Those are the only notifications I have turned on. So, my family knows if they want me, text. My clients know if they need something urgent, text. And so my clients will often email me with all the detail and everything I need, and then text to just say, need you to check that email. So, but every other notification is off because I just know if I get a ding or if I get a pop up, a banner or whatever else, I'm going to it because frankly, it's been pretty boring. Like, like it's something new to think about or look at during COVID. I'm gonna fall for it when I don't want to. So that's why no notifications other than text, two different devices, like just make it easier for myself to keep those healthy boundaries.
Yeah, definitely. And then I really like the part you touched on, picking up the phone, like, if someone really needed you, and knowing that the people that need you know to call if they need something urgently. I think that's something that's missing, not just because of COVID, but just because of our technological society, right? Like people don't pick up the phone anymore, right?
Yes,
I find
yes.
myself messaging people saying, is it okay if I call now?
Right.
As
Right,
opposed
which
to calling.
that's kind of respectful, right? Like people now freak out when the phone rings because the phone so seldom rings. So I think it's okay to text and say, can I call or can we jump on a chat? That makes a lot of sense. It's a positive thing. I actually created a tool that I call my owner's manual. So I always say, you buy a new appliance or whatever, you buy a new dishwasher, it says, put the bowls in this way so that the inside gets clean, or put the cutlery this way. Well, why don't we as humans have owner's manuals? Like, if you want me to function optimally, here's how to work me. And so, like, I have in my owner's manual things like, look, morning is sacred for me. It's when I do my thinking and my writing. So, unless it's an emergency, don't expect me in the morning. But afternoon, I'm totally here for you. I share this idea of like, if you need me in an evening or a weekend, please, this is my cell number. Like, phone me anytime. I'd much rather that you phone me than that you fret about something or whatever else. So, like, there's a bunch of stuff in the owner's manual. And so I really encourage people to, have an owner's manual conversation with your manager, have it with your peers. It's very, very valuable and, I think even in grad school, I could have got a lot of benefit from that, right? Just like, how do I work? How do you work with me? That kind of thing. And we don't have those conversations enough. So the more you can have an owner's manual conversation, the better.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of what I'm hearing you say too is about communication, right? With your coworkers and with your superior. So, like, because that's one of the things, right? Is also within this virtual context, we don't necessarily see or know how people are working at their optimum, right?
No.
And so as an employee or as an individual, being able to communicate that, like for myself, I know that I work better under pressure,
Yeah.
right? So if there's not an air of pressure there, I don't work as well. And so the people that I work with, sharing that with them, likely would, create a lot of positives on both sides, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then you have the chance to negotiate. So if you say, I work best under pressure, but the way that you've been doing that is to leave things to the last minute, then having a conversation that allows your peers to say, well, except that then for me, I get things late and I work better when I've got some time to let things soak. So, okay, so let's talk about how we set deadlines differently then so that, so that it works for both of us or, whatever else. So, the more you can have an owner's manual conversation that's two-way, it just really heads off a lot of issues at the pass. It's a really positive thing. Just
definitely.
looking at
Good question.
Leah's
Yeah.
question. Yeah, yeah.
Do Okay.
Virtual interviewing. Um, when I was at Waterloo, virtual interviewing, so like in the mid 90s, virtual interviewing was just coming on. And one of the other graduate students in my program did his doctoral research on virtual interviewing. And I'm trying to remember, I think it was Derek Chapman, who's now at the University of Calgary. Have to see where the research has gone on that. Um, so one of the things I have seen in the research, and this is a little thing, which I'm violating just because of my setup, but I have read that it really helps to have just above your belly button to your head, all showing in the screen. There is something that makes it easier for the person on the other end to interpret the body language. There's something the brain likes better. So one of the things we know in body language is that when hands aren't visible, there's some kind of a subconscious trigger of warning, because it's like, I guess it's very primal, right? Of like, what are they doing? Are they reaching for a knife? Or so that would be one thing. If you can get your setup so that your hands are mostly in the frame, that's a small technical kind of thing. Smiling, so important. And it's interesting, even if you're on the phone, I always do this experiment. Like if you close your eyes for a second, and if I talk when I'm not smiling, and then I talk when I'm smiling, what happens is when you smile, the muscles pull your soft palate up and it makes the echo chamber of your mouth a different shape. So even if you're only on the phone, the person on the other end of the phone can hear if you're smiling or not. They won't know consciously, but they'll know subconsciously. So I put little sticky notes beside the camera that say things that matter to me. So one of my friends, Jessica Holmes, she's an amazing comedian. She puts smiley faces all around, like literally all around the camera, just to remind her to keep smiling. So that's a big one. But there is research on this that I don't know, Leah. So I would love for you to make use of that world's most valuable possession, your UW library card, and just see what's been done. But those are the things that I've learned are really, really, really important. Yeah. Um, okay. What else are you thinking about, Jaydum? Let's make this informal.
Yes.
What are you what are you thinking about? What do you think people are worried about? What are their realities, do you think?
Um, Let me think. So I feel like collaboration,
Yeah.
like the collaborative aspect. So working together and
Yeah.
working off of each other. I find that's tricky, right? Without just directly going, let's have a meeting and taking the time to do that and add to all the other meetings. So I'm
Yeah.
interested in meaningful collaboration and how to go
Yeah.
about that, like during the
One
event.
of my new favorite things I've learned about, and it's just new research coming out, is a technique called a communication burst. And I really love this. So, one of the problems in virtual teams is we kind of don't know when someone else is working. And that's why we have to send a text that says, is it okay if I call you? Because we don't know who's working when. And we don't. And the other thing is, we send an email, but there's a fairly long amount of time to be polite that we have to wait before we start nagging. So, there's this real inefficiency to collaborating virtually. So communication bursts, you actually kind of look at your calendar and you say, let's schedule some time chunks where we all agree that we're all going to be working on this project. Again, make it suit you. It could be an hour a week, it could be 3 hours a day, like whatever, you have to make it work for you. But um, then start the communication burst. If you want, jump on a 5-minute video call at the start to say, what's everybody working on? Just to orient, or here's some new information we got since last we talked. And then some people actually just leave the video on and then get to work. Some people like that it feels like we're kind of sitting next to one another, or you can turn it off. But then basically what it is for the length of time of the communication burst, you're mostly working independently. But what happens is, instead of sending an email and 6 hours later you haven't had a response, because you know the person is working on that project at this time, you just ping them and you solve it right then and there. So there's a much greater responsiveness. If 3 of you need to, jump into a breakout room and discuss something, you can. So it just takes away the lag of waiting for things to go back and forth. It takes away the awkwardness of, am I interrupting you? Because everybody has agreed, no, this is time when we're all going to at the same time be moving this forward. And this technique just seems brilliant to me. So really great if you're in different time zones. So if you're working with other students and some of the students in your class have, stayed at home in India and you're here, okay, great. Then we're going to make really good use of 7 a.m. Eastern time, where we're going to do a 2-hour burst. And that means, it's going to be night in India, but we're all going to agree that everybody's going to have this not perfect time that they're going to be working, but at least we'll all know. So we won't feel badly about interrupting each other at that time. It's on the calendar. We can, if we have kids, we can make childcare arrangements. We're going to do this burst. So I really love the idea of a burst, because the majority of the burst is used to just get work done, but it eliminates that problem of having the lag, having to wait, that if you need something solved in 5 minutes, you can just get it solved and then keep moving. So that's my new favorite collaboration technique. The other tip I've learned, and the research is just emerging, so who knows what we'll learn later, but one of the things is that with collaboration, if you need to be task focused, if you're trying to do a creative task or things like that, that it's actually really beneficial to share your screen. So on something like Zoom, hit share screen. So everybody's looking at the same thing, but turn off the video. So as I was alluding to earlier, the processing power it requires to be trying to interpret signals from thumbnails and from bad video seems to be affecting your ability to really cognitively focus in on the task. So it's another collaboration technique. So where are there times where we can just have audio so we can hear each other, but we turn off the video in favor of everybody looking at, we're working on a structural equation model and we've got it up on the screen and we're all looking at it and we're moving things around, and virtual whiteboards are great for this, but not video. We have defaulted to kind of have two modes right now. We have like the text or email, the really lean asynchronous communication, and then we have video calls, which is rich synchronous communication. We've kind of missed that. No, we can actually have leaner synchronous communication, like sharing a screen and having an audio call. So we need to find more methods that suit the task at hand. And so I think collaboration, if we can do those couple of things, so using communication bursts, and secondly, moving to a more diverse set of communication collaboration strategies, including some that take away the video and focus us on the task at hand.
Yeah, I think those are really helpful points. It's funny too, because when on the Zooms, how you say to shut off the cameras, there's two things that happen in my mind when I'm in those situations. One of them is like, oh, well, I need to be on camera because I don't want anybody thinking that like I'm doing something else that is not what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, but to your point, I sometimes get distracted by all the faces on the screen, right? Like
Yeah,
for some reason too, I always want to see all the people. I don't just want to
me
see
too.
the person that's speaking, because sometimes if the mute's not on, then a person pops up randomly,
Yeah.
right, when they make a noise.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think those are really great points.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're getting better. So, as Zabina is saying, right, we're getting better at virtualizing office spaces and ways of working and things like that. So I think we have to try a variety of them, be willing to just try stuff and see what works and quickly discard the stuff that isn't working. But also to have more variety in your week. So if you open up your calendar and you have a day of all Zoom calls, which of those can you move? So I would, which of them can I move to audio and shared screen? Which of those actually could I say, you know what, would you mind? We're just, talking some things through. Can I walk and talk? Like, who is the person in your day that you could talk to with earphones in while walking outdoors, right? Add that to your day. So just looking at your week and saying, we don't have enough variety in our collaboration and communication strategies. How do I get more variety? Have a little bit more techniques suited to the task at hand.
Yeah, and I think that kind of works too in a way of like you are able to kind of do some of your important things like taking care of yourself by taking a
Yeah.
walk, right? So that work-life balance, it's like taking into consideration, oh, I can do two things at once as long as it is available with that person that you'd be speaking to, right?
Yeah. And I think if you think about, a conversation with a prof or a conversation with like those kind of the conversations that you used to have in a lounge or something like that, right? Those are great conversations for a walk and talk, right? If there's a car drives by or whatever, that's fine. You're not doing anything that it matters if that happens, or a dog barks in the park or whatever else. So, just how do we find those kinds of conversations where we can mix it up? And certainly, if you can get out into, it's getting better as we're getting later into the spring and it's light a little bit later. But for a long time, we were in this mode that if you waited to get outside until you were done work, it was pitch black. So it's like, don't wait, go do a call, talk to somebody, connect with somebody, do something valuable, but do it while you're outdoors, because you're going to have to do it in the middle of the day or as soon as you're done work. There's no daylight left. So hopefully that'll be getting better soon, but it's made the winter quite long.
Yeah, it has.
Yeah.
Well, I'm wondering if anybody has any other questions. I have another question, but I just thought I'd see if anybody else has any at all. Um, and if not, like I'll go with this one here. So
Okay, go for it.
yeah, sure, why not? So I was just wondering, like in regards to trends that you're seeing because of COVID-19. Um, Trends that you're seeing because of COVID-19 in regards to the biggest challenges. I think you actually spoke to that already, now that I'm thinking about it, like
Yeah.
with the
Yeah, we
teams.
talked a little bit about that. I think what's
Yeah.
really interesting is going to be trends with respect to COVID-19, which of them end up being enduring and which of them, go back, right? That'll be really interesting. So, um, a lot of people ask me what's going to happen to the workplace in the future and things like that. Well, I think we've shown ourselves that a lot of what we said was impossible virtually was just our comfort and our norms. So, we said we could never hire somebody without meeting them in person. Like, well, no, that was just because we had all these old norms. And frankly, norms that promoted lots of discrimination and were pretty crappy practices to begin with. So no, we can hire people because we couldn't go a year without hiring people. So we figured it out. Right. So there's just a lot less now that I think is taboo to be done virtually. So I do suspect that much greater flexibility is going to be here to stay for the vast majority of workplaces where obviously it's not so easy in the service economy, things like that. But in office jobs, I think more flexibility is going to be here to stay. I think we're going to have a big uptick for a little while in conferences and in-person meetings because there's so much pent-up demand. We just, we desperately want to connect with people. So I think it's going to be interesting. We're going to be in one ditch from COVID with just way too little interaction. I suspect we're going to head straight into the other ditch where everybody's just going to want to be together so much. And we're going to go back to all this stuff. And then we're going to kind of at some point go, oh, okay, I think that's kind of overkill. And then I think we'll return to something more hybrid, more flexible. I think one of the other things, so if I think about an organization I'm a part of, which is a not-for-profit board that I'm a member of, we're a national organization, but because of antiquated ways that we worked, our board was almost exclusively here in Toronto, board members here in Toronto, which meant that we just didn't have the diversity of people that we ideally needed. So once the board went to all virtual meetings, we started recruiting these amazing people who never would have been available to us if they'd had to be in Toronto once a month for a meeting. So I think there's going to be another big workplace trend will be that this is really good for diversity. So we already have anti-systemic racism now as an equally as important theme out of 2020 as COVID was. And now we're going to have this chance to find talent where it is because we're able to engage people remotely. And that's really, really exciting. So I think there's some really positive things that have happened during COVID that will become a part of how we do things for the future. But I think it'll be nice when we get a little bit more of that human connection, physical carbon-based life forms being near each other.
Yeah.
Will return a bit, but my prediction would be that we're going to have a big ditch to ditch overcorrection before we get it to a good spot.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the thing too, like in regards to speaking events and having people, guest speakers that, are across the world, like having that ability is amazing. But then I also am like, oh no, like I want to be able to go on those little traveling ventures, right? So I wonder too whether organizations in regards to cost effectiveness and things like that, if they'll just always go to the virtual platform as opposed to sending people over.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I don't have a good prediction on it. What I would love is that they just spend their money more wisely. So if I think about how many times I've flown a 5-hour flight for a 2-hour meeting, um, so I want that to go away. Like that is just so unnecessary. Save all that money, but save that money to invest in really immersive, amazing experiences, more investment in training for people, more like all those sorts of things. So, ultimately, I would love if they didn't try and just cut that money altogether, but if we were less wasteful with it, if we actually thought about what warrants face to face, and if it warrants face to face, let's do it upright. Let's make sure that we break bread together when we're together. That's so important to building trust among individuals. Let's actually do it somewhere that's conducive to a different kind of conversation. So not that we necessarily spend less money on those things, but that we stop wasting it on what was just really frivolous. I think the interesting thing is I know a lot of business travelers who it was part of their identity to be a business traveler, like how high their status was on the airlines. And so it'll be interesting to see if we can, wean people off of those things as I think the other thing, frankly, is that, lots of people who have big jobs and families and, work travel was just their break, like where they could, have a night without the kids and, have a fancy dinner at a restaurant paid for on an expense account. And so though that level in organizations, that leadership level in organizations may drive some of it right back up for those reasons. Okay, I see the question about websites to recommend for virtual team building or collaboration. I wish I had a good answer to that. So there's lots of stuff on my own website. So just lianedavey.com. In the blog section, there's hundreds of resources and discussions, and it's fully searchable. So you can look up what you're looking for. But um, my favorite site for everything is hbr.org. They just write so many great, first of all, there's just a huge volume, but so many practical, usually research-based things about, and they've been putting out a lot of really good stuff around virtual and really focused on this year. So hbr.org is always a strong suit for me. I look to it for so many different topics, for sure.
Awesome. Okay, that's great. Does anybody else have any other questions for Liane? I feel like we're so lucky to be speaking with you, and I'm just so grateful because, you know, just seeing the success that you've had and like the life that you've built for yourself, and talking to you prior, you know, and you shared what I think is really amazing life work balance in regards to taking time off each year
Yeah.
to go and travel with your children.
And that's kind of what I meant when I said that, you know, you have to realize when bad work-life balance is a self-inflicted wound. Like I realized that at some point. At some point, I just started saying, you know, what am I doing? So it was interesting. I managed a team in a consulting firm. And one of the things that happened is my kids were both competitive dancers. And it was very crazy trying to deal with their schedules. And we had this elaborate carpooling with different families to make it all work. But the way it worked for about 3 years was that I had to take the kids on Mondays. So I had to leave downtown Toronto, drive to pick up all these kids at the school, take them to get some food, and then take them to the dance studio because they were going to dance for hours. So I had to leave at about 3 o'clock. And in consulting, that's about 2.5 hours earlier than most people would have thought to leave. So at some point, I learned that as the team leader, the most important thing I could do at 3 o'clock was make a big commotion that I was leaving. So I'd be like, bye, everyone. Gotta go. Like and I didn't want to slip out. And I wanted to say that this is a crazy life and we travel a lot, we work a lot. And when you need to work, you need to work. But we also have this flexibility. And so I made it very conspicuous that I was leaving the right in hopes that other people would start to do the same and start to say, it's okay for, and then, you know, that only took me so far. And then at some point I realized 4 weeks vacation isn't enough. I have so little time with these kids at home. And so we quit so that we could take 9 weeks off. And so for the past 6 years, I've had 9 weeks vacation, which starts to feel both like I have dedicated, we have a month in the summer full time with the kids. And then, you know, I have a few spots throughout the year to recharge because my brain is going all the time and it's better if it gets a week off every once in a while. So, you know, I really, for me, some of those choices were really important to me. It was, I don't need to climb a corporate ladder. I don't need to have a bigger title. I don't need any of that. I need a life that I enjoy daily, as opposed to a life that, you know, once a year I look back and think it was good in retrospect, right? So, yeah, being able to and having the privilege to be able to make those choices is amazing.
Yeah, and I think it's amazing because you made those choices for yourself and your family upon that awareness, and you're very successful still, right? So even you taking that step back and being able to see like the way that you did that, and I think it's awesome that you modeling that for your employees and other coworkers to see that, yeah, this is life, and it's okay that things are the way that they are, and sometimes they need to take space in this way. And I thought that was great. And in the previous conversation that we had, where you were moderating,
Yeah.
one of the speakers had talked about how with their Zooms, they only book their Zooms for 45 minutes, and then they have the 15 minutes in between. And I just thought that that was really great as well in modeling and showing kind of how to create boundaries and space between those
Yeah,
meetings.
for me, when I discovered the Calendly app, that is like that changed my life because I can set up a whole bunch of different types of meetings. So I can set up a 30-minute or a 45-minute. I don't have an hour because for the same reason, right? I need that time to have. So first of all, so that if the conversation's going 5 minutes over, I don't have to be like, sorry, gotta go, right? That just feels yucky. But also so that, if I've had my legs crossed the whole call, I have time to go to the bathroom before the next call. So, but I also set up Calendly so those calls only go between 1 and 5:30. And if it's a client call, it can go anywhere between 1 and 5:30. But if it's, I get calls from people saying, like they want a network or they want an informational interview. So I don't put those on Mondays or Tuesdays. Like here, you can have a slot and it's only a couple of hours at the end of the week where I have those slots because I want my calendar. This is one of the questions I ask myself all the time when I open my calendar. Is it serving me and my goals and my priorities, or is my calendar serving someone else? And once I use the Calendly app to have my calendar serve me, my life is so much better. And so if somebody needs a morning, like the big software client I was talking about, their half of the team is in Germany. That's okay, but it means they're going to have to come to me. I'm going to have to make a deliberate decision that yes, that can go in the morning. If another client that has half the team in Hong Kong and Malaysia, that's going to have to be at night. But again, you cannot do that automatically. That's going to have to come through me. I'm going to have to make the conscious decision. So if I'm scheduling to have the session, which I have coming up, a couple of sessions between 7 p.m. and 10 p.m., then when I put it in, I immediately put the afternoon off that day to say, I'm going to bake or do something for me in the afternoon. So just making your calendar serve you and using tools now like Calendly to be able to do that. Oh, so good. So good. So good. Oh, a question.
Where is it?
Oh, great question. How will remote work affect people with disabilities, other marginalized groups? Um, Yeah, well, I think for so many, it's so phenomenal. So I was doing a session for the University of Ottawa, and I was reading all the background materials on the participants. And one of the women had said that she's blind. And so if any materials need to come out to her, then she's going to need a variety of things to make it work. But she said, but if it's virtual, she says, I'm good because my whole computer is set up with all the assistive technologies. So you don't have to do a thing. And I just thought, wow, for her, this automatically becomes something so much easier where she can build her environment to be really conducive. So if you think about a variety of other disabilities that need, or, think about, Muslim employees who now, they have a prayer room in their own house. They don't need that accommodated. They can work their day around the call to prayer. They get like, we can just accommodate people who have, kids who might have said, I could never work in the kind of job I'm capable of because there's not enough flexibility to care for aging parents or whatever else it is. So I think, I believe, and I've seen that now there's just more focus on what's the work and can you do the work, and much more flexibility around how you do the work. So that could be one of the most positive things, that the focus goes much more to what you contribute as opposed to how you contribute it. And that would be good for all of us because we will tap into the phenomenal people who've been underused in the workplace, these great assets that we have who, when there was not so one of my friends, she's been a quadriplegic since she was 12, and she was sharing her story recently, or 30 years of quadriplegia, and just talking about how many jobs come right off the list because of either like there's an issue with elevators, or there's an issue with washroom accessibility, or well, when she can create her own environment at home, none of those things is a problem. She's got them all. So I think we should be in a much better place for people with handicaps, people with people of various different um, like BIPOC folks, just all of those people who in some ways have been systemically discriminated against. It should become easier to get all the richness that we need from them.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. I think that that leaves more space, right? And accommodating situations. So yeah, and we are at 2:00. So
Oh my goodness.
yeah.
Wow. Okay. That
Yeah,
just flew by.
it just flew by. So yeah, thank you so much for taking the time today to have a
My
conversation about
pleasure.
this. I hope that the people that are here that are watching found this valuable. I definitely did. And just, knowing how much control I have in my work-life balance and making that happen. So yeah, thank you so much, Liane.
My pleasure. Thanks so much, everybody.
Have a great rest of the day.
You too.